Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other kids at Riverside High School. While her classmates wore designer clothes and talked about their weekend parties, she spent her lunch breaks alone in the library, reading books about aviation and dreaming of flying helicopters. Her thick glasses, second-hand clothes, and quiet demeanor made her an easy target for the popular crowd. The bullying started small in freshman year. Jessica Chen, the head cheerleader with her perfect blonde highlights and expensive handbags, would whisper cruel comments as Sarah walked by. "Look at the airplane girl," she would say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still dreaming about flying away from here?" The laughter that followed felt like daggers to Sarah's heart. Marcus Thompson, the star quarterback with his Letterman jacket and cocky smile, made it his personal mission to humiliate Sarah whenever possible. He would knock her books out of her hands in the hallway, trip her as she walked to class, and once even threw her homework in the trash while the teacher wasn't looking. "Why don't you just fly away, freak?" he would taunt, making airplane gestures with his arms while his friends erupted in laughter. The worst incident happened during senior year in the cafeteria. Sarah had been eating her homemade sandwich quietly at a corner table when Jessica and her crew approached. "Hey everyone, look what the cat dragged in," Jessica announced loudly, drawing attention from the entire lunchroom. She grabbed Sarah's worn backpack and dumped its contents on the floor. Books, pencils, and her precious aviation magazines scattered everywhere. "Oh look, more airplane stuff," Marcus said, picking up one of the magazines and pretending to read it with exaggerated interest. "Maybe if you study hard enough, you'll get a job cleaning the bathrooms at the airport." The entire cafeteria erupted in cruel laughter as Sarah scrambled to collect her belongings, tears streaming down her face. But what hurt Sarah the most wasn't the public humiliation or the daily taunts. It was the way her teachers pretended not to see what was happening. Mrs. Rodriguez, her English teacher, would look the other way when Marcus made his cruel comments. Mr. Peterson, the guidance counselor, told her to just ignore them and focus on your studies when she finally worked up the courage to report the bullying. Sarah's home life wasn't much better. Her mother, Maria, worked double shifts as a nurse at the local hospital to make ends meet after Sarah's father had abandoned them when she was 12. The small apartment they shared in the rough part of town was a constant reminder of their financial struggles. While her classmates drove brand new cars to school, Sarah took 3 buses to get there every morning, often arriving exhausted before the first bell even rang. Despite everything, Sarah never gave up on her dream of flying. She had discovered her passion for aviation when she was 10 years old and saw a military helicopter landing at a local airshow. The pilot, a confident woman in a crisp uniform, had smiled and waved at the crowd. In that moment, Sarah knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. Every spare moment was spent reading about helicopters, studying flight manuals she borrowed from the library, and watching online videos about pilot training. Her bedroom walls were covered with pictures of military aircraft and female pilots who had broken barriers in the aviation world. While other kids her age were worried about prom dates and college parties, Sarah was calculating the costs of flight school and researching military recruitment programs. The bullying reached its peak during the final weeks of senior year. Jessica and Marcus had convinced the entire senior class to treat Sarah like she was invisible. No one would sit near her in class, talk to her in the hallways, or include her in any group projects. The isolation was devastating, but Sarah used it as fuel for her determination. On graduation day, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Sarah heard Marcus shout from the audience, "Good luck with that flying thing, loser." But she didn't let it break her spirit. She had been accepted to a community college with a strong pre-aviation program, and, more importantly, she had been in contact with a military recruiter who saw potential in her dedication and academic achievements. The summer after graduation, while her former classmates partied and enjoyed their freedom, Sarah worked multiple jobs to save money for her future. She cleaned offices at night, worked at a local diner during the day, and spent her free time volunteering at a small airfield outside of town. The old pilot who ran the place, Captain Rodriguez, had taken her under his wing and let her help with basic maintenance in exchange for occasional lessons in a small training aircraft. Those flying lessons were the highlight of Sarah's summer. The first time she took the controls of an airplane, she felt a sense of freedom and purpose she had never experienced before. Up in the sky, away from the cruel voices and judgmental stares, she could finally breathe. Captain Rodriguez told her she was a natural pilot with excellent instincts and encouraged her to pursue military flight training. As the summer came to an end, Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. Instead of starting community college in the fall, she decided to enlist in the Army and pursue her dream of becoming a helicopter pilot through military training. Her mother was terrified but ultimately supportive, knowing how much this meant to her daughter. The day before she left for basic training, Sarah drove past Riverside High School one last time. She thought about all the pain and humiliation she had endured within those walls, but also about the strength and determination it had given her. The bullies thought they had broken her spirit, but they had actually forged her into something stronger than they could ever imagine. Basic training at Fort Moore was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The drill sergeants were tough, but their criticism was constructive rather than cruel. They pushed her to her physical and mental limits, but they did it to make her stronger, not to tear her down. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere. The girl who had been mocked for her quiet nature and awkward appearance began to transform. The intense physical training sculpted her body into peak condition. Hours of running, push-ups, and obstacle courses built muscles she never knew she had. Her posture straightened, her confidence grew, and the thick glasses were replaced with contact lenses that revealed her striking brown eyes. But the most significant change wasn't physical. The military environment taught Sarah leadership skills, tactical thinking, and, most importantly, self-respect. She learned to speak with authority, make quick decisions under pressure, and command respect from her peers. The shy, bullied teenager was evolving into a confident young woman with purpose and direction. After completing basic training with honors, Sarah was selected for the Army's helicopter pilot program. The competition was fierce, with only the top candidates from across the country making the cut. Sarah's dedication to studying aviation for years finally paid off. While other candidates struggled with the technical aspects of helicopter operations, Sarah excelled beyond all expectations. Flight school was demanding in ways she had never imagined. The academic coursework covered advanced mathematics, physics, meteorology, and complex aircraft systems. Sarah spent countless hours in simulators, learning to handle emergency situations and perfecting her flying techniques. The instructors were impressed by her natural ability and her relentless work ethic. During her first solo flight in a UH-60 Blackhawk helicopter, Sarah felt a rush of emotion that brought tears to her eyes. She was actually flying one of the most sophisticated aircraft in the world. The girl who had been mocked for her aviation dreams was now soaring through the sky in a multi-million-dollar military helicopter. The other pilot candidates came from diverse backgrounds, but many had grown up in military families or prestigious academies. Sarah was one of the few who had clawed her way up from poverty and adversity. This background gave her a unique perspective and an unshakable determination that impressed both her instructors and fellow students. As months passed, Sarah's reputation as an exceptional pilot began to spread throughout the aviation community. She had an intuitive understanding of helicopter dynamics and could perform complex maneuvers that seasoned pilots found challenging. Her instructors started using her flights as examples for other students, and she was often asked to demonstrate advanced techniques. The transformation wasn't just professional. Sarah's personal confidence blossomed as she formed genuine friendships with her fellow pilots. These were people who respected her abilities and valued her contributions. They didn't care about her humble background or her awkward teenage years. What mattered was her skill, her integrity, and her commitment to the mission. During advanced training exercises, Sarah's unit was tasked with complex search and rescue simulations. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and make split-second decisions in challenging conditions earned her recognition from senior officers. She was developing a reputation as someone who could handle the most difficult missions with grace and precision. The physical transformation continued as well. The combination of rigorous training, proper nutrition, and newfound confidence had changed Sarah's entire appearance. Her hair, now styled professionally, framed a face that radiated strength and determination. The girl who had hunched over her books to avoid attention now stood tall with the bearing of a military officer. Letters from home kept Sarah connected to her roots. Her mother, Maria, was incredibly proud of her daughter's achievements but worried about the dangerous nature of military aviation. Sarah reassured her that the extensive training made her as safe as possible, and that she was finally living her dream. As Sarah progressed through increasingly advanced levels of training, she began specializing in combat aviation. The skills required for military helicopter operations were far more complex than civilian flying. She learned to navigate in hostile territory, perform tactical insertions and extractions, and operate sophisticated weapons systems. The culmination of her training came during a joint military exercise with Special Forces units. Sarah's helicopter was tasked with inserting and extracting elite soldiers in simulated combat conditions. The mission required precise flying in challenging terrain, perfect timing, and seamless coordination with ground forces. Sarah executed the operation flawlessly, earning commendations from both her superiors and the Special Forces team. Word of Sarah's exceptional abilities reached the highest levels of military aviation command. She was recommended for assignment to an elite helicopter unit that supported the most sensitive military operations around the world. The selection process was extremely competitive, but Sarah's combination of technical skill, leadership potential, and unflappable demeanor made her an obvious choice. As she prepared for her first operational deployment, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from the scared, bullied teenager at Riverside High School. The girl who had been mocked for her dreams was now one of the most skilled helicopter pilots in her graduating class. She had not only achieved her goal of flying but had exceeded every expectation along the way. The news of her upcoming deployment reached her hometown through military family networks. Some of her former classmates had heard that Sarah Martinez, the quiet girl from their high school, had joined the military and become a pilot. But most dismissed these stories as rumors. They couldn't imagine the awkward outcast they remembered becoming anything significant. Sarah's mother had kept some newspaper clippings about local residents serving in the military, including a small article about Sarah's achievements in pilot training. But, in the small community where gossip traveled fast, surprisingly few people had paid attention to the story of the girl who had once been considered a nobody. Sarah's first deployment took her to Afghanistan, where she flew support missions for special operations teams in some of the most dangerous territory in the world. The young woman who had once been afraid to speak up in class was now responsible for the lives of elite soldiers who depended on her skill and courage to get them home safely. The missions were intense and demanding. Flying at night through mountainous terrain while avoiding enemy fire required every ounce of training and natural ability Sarah possessed. Her Blackhawk helicopter became known among the Special Forces units as one of the most reliable rides in the theater. Soldiers specifically requested her crew when they had particularly challenging missions. During one memorable operation, Sarah's helicopter was tasked with extracting a wounded Special Forces team from a hot landing zone under enemy fire. As bullets struck the aircraft and explosions erupted around them, Sarah maintained perfect control of the helicopter while her crew chief provided covering fire. She managed to land in an impossibly tight space and hold the aircraft steady while the wounded soldiers were loaded aboard. The successful extraction earned Sarah her first combat decoration and the respect of some of the most elite warriors in the military. The citation for her Distinguished Flying Cross described her actions as extraordinary heroism and exceptional flying skill in the face of grave danger. The shy teenager who had been mocked for her dreams was now being honored for courage under fire. As her deployment continued, Sarah's reputation grew throughout the aviation community. Senior officers began taking notice of the young pilot who consistently performed above expectations in the most challenging conditions. Her mission success rate was remarkable, and, more importantly, she had never lost a soldier under her care. Between missions, Sarah found time to mentor younger pilots who were just arriving in the combat zone. She remembered what it felt like to be underestimated and overlooked, so she made sure that every pilot in her unit felt valued and supported. Her leadership style was firm but compassionate, and it earned her loyalty from everyone who served with her. The combat deployment also continued Sarah's personal transformation. The constant pressure and responsibility had refined her decision-making abilities and strengthened her natural leadership instincts. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested in the most extreme circumstances and proven herself capable of handling anything. When Sarah returned home after her first deployment, she had been promoted to Chief Warrant Officer and was selected for the Army's most elite helicopter unit. This assignment would involve the most sensitive and dangerous missions that the military conducted around the world. The selection process was so competitive that only a handful of pilots from each year group were chosen. The advanced training for her new assignment took place at a classified facility where Sarah learned to operate the most sophisticated helicopter systems in the military arsenal. She mastered night vision operations, electronic warfare techniques, and specialized insertion and extraction procedures. The training pushed her abilities to new levels and prepared her for missions that few people would ever know about. During this period, Sarah also completed her college degree through military education programs. While balancing her demanding training schedule, she earned a bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering with highest honors. The girl who had struggled to find her place in high school was now excelling at the highest levels of both military and academic achievement. Sarah's new unit deployed her to multiple conflict zones around the world. She flew missions in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, always in support of the most critical operations. Her helicopter skills had become so refined that she could place an aircraft in spaces that other pilots considered impossible, and she could do it in complete darkness while under fire. The physical transformation that had begun in basic training was now complete. Years of military fitness training, combined with the demands of combat operations, had sculpted Sarah into peak physical condition. But, more importantly, the confidence and bearing she had developed made her almost unrecognizable from the awkward teenager she had once been. Back home, 10 years had passed since graduation from Riverside High School. Most of Sarah's former classmates had followed predictable paths. Jessica Chen had married her college boyfriend and now spent her days posting photos of her suburban lifestyle on social media. Marcus Thompson had played football briefly at a small college before dropping out and taking over his father's struggling car dealership. The reunion planning committee, led by Jessica, was struggling to generate interest in the 10-year gathering. Many classmates had moved away or were simply too busy with their lives to care about revisiting high school memories. The committee decided they needed to create some excitement by inviting some unlikely guests, including people who had been outsiders during their school years. Jessica remembered Sarah Martinez as the perfect target for their entertainment. She assumed that the awkward girl with thick glasses was probably working some dead-end job and would be intimidated by the successful lives of her former classmates. The reunion committee thought it would be amusing to see how the school outcast had turned out after all these years. They found Sarah's mother's address easily enough and sent an invitation to her childhood home. The return address showed she was still in the same small apartment where she had grown up, which confirmed their assumptions about her modest circumstances. They never bothered to research what Sarah had actually accomplished since leaving high school. Maria Martinez received the reunion invitation and immediately called Sarah, who was between deployments at her base in North Carolina. Sarah laughed when her mother described the invitation, remembering all too well the people who had made her teenage years miserable. Her initial instinct was to ignore it completely. But, as Sarah thought about the invitation over the following days, she realized it represented an opportunity. Not for revenge or to show off, but to demonstrate that the dreams they had mocked had actually come true. She decided to attend the reunion, though she had no intention of revealing her military career beforehand. Sarah requested leave for the reunion weekend and began making arrangements to fly home. She planned to arrive quietly and see how her former classmates had changed over the years. She was curious about whether the bullies who had tormented her had grown into better people, or if they were still the same cruel individuals she remembered. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that she would be flying to her high school reunion in military aircraft. She arranged for her transport to conclude with a helicopter flight to the airfield closest to her hometown. It would be convenient and would also serve as a reminder of how far she had traveled from those painful teenage years. The reunion committee was delighted when they received word that Sarah Martinez would be attending. Jessica Chen immediately began planning how to maximize the entertainment value of having the former school outcast at their gathering. She shared the news with Marcus Thompson and the rest of their old crew, and they started reminiscing about all the ways they had tormented the awkward girl with aviation dreams. "I can't wait to see what she looks like now," Jessica said during one of their planning meetings at the country club. "She's probably still wearing those awful thick glasses and reading airplane magazines." The group laughed as they recalled their cruel teenage behavior, showing no signs of remorse for the pain they had caused. Marcus suggested they create a special presentation highlighting the most likely to succeed predictions from their yearbook, knowing that Sarah had been voted most likely to work at an airport as a cruel joke by their classmates. They thought it would be hilarious to remind everyone of how they had mocked her dreams and, then, see how far she had fallen short of even those low expectations. The reunion venue was booked at the Grand Ballroom of the Riverside Country Club, the same exclusive establishment where Jessica's family had held their social events during high school. The committee spared no expense on decorations, catering, and entertainment, wanting to create an impressive display of their collective success and social status. Invitations were sent to the entire graduating class with explicit instructions about dress code and expectations. The committee wanted this to be a showcase of how well their class had done in the decade since graduation. They encouraged everyone to bring photos of their accomplishments, their homes, their families, and their careers. As the reunion date approached, social media buzzed with excitement from classmates sharing updates about their lives. Lawyers, doctors, business owners, and other successful professionals posted about their achievements and expressed eagerness to reconnect with old friends. The overall tone suggested this would be a celebration of prosperity and status. Jessica had specifically arranged for Sarah to be seated at a table near the front of the room where everyone could see her. She wanted to make sure that the former outcast would be highly visible during the evening's festivities. The committee had even planned some special recognitions that would draw attention to certain classmates, including Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah was completing her final preparations for the trip home. She had decided to keep her military service private initially, curious to see how her former classmates would treat her if they still thought she was the same vulnerable person they remembered. She packed civilian clothes that were nice but not flashy, wanting to blend in rather than attract attention. The flight arrangements Sarah had made were more complex than anyone realized. She would be traveling on military orders that concluded with a training exercise near her hometown. Her commanding officer had approved the trip as part of a personnel transport mission that would demonstrate helicopter capabilities to local government officials. Sarah's mother, Maria, was nervous about her daughter attending the reunion. She remembered how much pain those classmates had caused and worried that they might try to hurt Sarah again. But Sarah assured her mother that she was no longer the frightened teenager who could be bullied and intimidated. She was going to the reunion out of curiosity, not fear. The week before the reunion, Jessica's committee made final preparations that included creating a slideshow of high school memories. As they sorted through old photos and yearbook pages, they found several images of Sarah being ignored or excluded from group activities. Jessica thought these would make amusing additions to their presentation. What the reunion committee didn't know was that Sarah's military achievements had already begun attracting attention in their hometown. The local newspaper had recently published an article about area residents serving in combat zones, and Sarah's name had been mentioned among the local heroes. However, the article had used her military rank and last name only, so most people didn't realize it was referring to their former classmate. Captain Rodriguez, the elderly pilot who had mentored Sarah during her high school summer, had followed her military career with great pride. He had kept newspaper clippings and military publications that featured her achievements. When he learned about the reunion, he considered attending as a guest to support Sarah, but she asked him to stay away, wanting to handle the situation on her own terms. The day of the reunion arrived with perfect weather. The country club's ballroom was decorated with school colors and banners celebrating the class of 10 years ago. Round tables were arranged throughout the room, each with centerpieces featuring photos from their high school years. The committee had created an elaborate display showcasing the various accomplishments of their classmates. Early arrivals began gathering in the cocktail hour, renewing friendships and comparing life updates. The conversations centered around careers, marriages, children, and material achievements. Several classmates had brought photo albums and portfolios to document their success stories over the past decade. Jessica arrived early to oversee the final details and ensure everything was perfect for her moment of triumph. She had planned the evening's entertainment carefully, including several opportunities to highlight the contrast between the successful classmates and those who had presumably failed to achieve much since graduation. Marcus Thompson made a grand entrance with his wife, a former college cheerleader who fit perfectly into their social circle. He immediately began working the room, renewing connections and positioning himself as one of the evening's most important attendees. His confidence and commanding presence showed that he still expected to be the center of attention. As more classmates arrived, the energy in the room built toward the evening's main events. The reunion committee had planned speeches, awards, and recognitions that would celebrate their collective achievements and remind everyone of the social hierarchies that had defined their high school experience. The stage was set for what Jessica and Marcus expected to be their finest moment of triumph over the girl they had once tormented. They had no idea that the young woman who would soon walk through those doors bore no resemblance to the frightened teenager they remembered. The transformation that had taken place over the past decade was about to shock everyone in ways they could never have imagined. Outside in the parking lot, luxury cars and expensive SUVs filled the spaces as successful professionals arrived to celebrate their achievements. The country club's valet service was busy handling the parade of impressive vehicles that reflected the prosperity many classmates had achieved since graduation. Nobody noticed the modest rental car that pulled into a space near the back of the lot, or the confident young woman who emerged from it and walked purposefully toward the entrance. Sarah Martinez had arrived at her reunion, and she was ready to face the people who had once made her life miserable. When Sarah walked into the country club ballroom, the conversations gradually died down as people tried to place the confident, athletic woman with the professional bearing. She wore a simple but elegant black dress that complemented her military posture and the quiet confidence she had developed through years of combat operations. Jessica Chen was the first to recognize her. "Oh my God, is that Sarah Martinez?" she whispered to Marcus Thompson, who was standing nearby with a drink in his hand. They had expected to see the same awkward girl with thick glasses and second-hand clothes, not this poised woman who moved through the room with obvious self-assurance. Sarah greeted several classmates politely but without enthusiasm. She could see the surprise in their eyes as they tried to reconcile her current appearance with their memories of the bullied outcast. Many seemed genuinely pleased to see her and expressed surprise at her transformation, while others appeared uncomfortable with the obvious changes. The evening proceeded with typical reunion activities. Classmates shared updates about their careers, families, and accomplishments. Sarah listened politely to stories about suburban homes, corporate jobs, and family vacations, contributing little about her own experiences. She was content to observe how her former tormentors had evolved over the past decade. Jessica had been waiting for the right moment to execute her planned humiliation. During the main presentation, she took the stage with a microphone and began highlighting various classmates and their achievements. She made sure to emphasize the most successful individuals while building toward what she thought would be the evening's most entertaining moment. "Now I'd like to recognize some of our classmates who have achieved their high school dreams," Jessica announced with a cruel smile. "Let's start with Sarah Martinez, who was voted most likely to work at an airport and dreamed of becoming a pilot. Sarah, would you like to tell everyone what you're doing now?" The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Sarah. Marcus Thompson was grinning with anticipation, expecting to witness the same public humiliation they had inflicted during high school. Other classmates shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something unpleasant was about to happen. Sarah stood gracefully and walked to the microphone with the bearing of someone accustomed to command situations. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, many of which showed the same cruel anticipation she remembered from her teenage years. But she felt no fear or anxiety, only a calm determination to set the record straight. "Thank you, Jessica," Sarah said in a clear, confident voice that carried easily through the room. "You're right that I dreamed of becoming a pilot. I'm happy to report that I achieved that goal. I'm currently a Chief Warrant Officer in the United States Army, and I pilot UH-60 Blackhawk helicopters for special operations missions around the world." The silence in the room was deafening. Jessica's smile faded as she realized that her attempt at humiliation had backfired spectacularly. Marcus Thompson's expression changed from anticipation to shock as the implications of Sarah's words began to sink in. Other classmates looked genuinely impressed and surprised by this unexpected revelation. Sarah continued speaking with the same calm authority she used when briefing military personnel. Over the past 10 years, I've flown combat missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other locations I'm not authorized to discuss. I've been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for Valor Under Fire, and I've successfully completed more than 200 combat missions without losing a single soldier under my care. The room erupted in whispered conversations as people tried to process this information. Several classmates began applauding, genuinely impressed by Sarah's achievements. Others looked embarrassed as they remembered their cruel treatment of the girl who had accomplished more than any of them had ever imagined possible. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had endured years of humiliation at the hands of these people, and she wanted them to understand exactly what they had mocked and dismissed. I should also mention that I'll be leaving here tonight in my official transportation, which happens to be a UH-60 Blackhawk helicopter that's currently waiting for me at the municipal airport. Jessica Chen looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her carefully planned evening of triumph had turned into her worst nightmare. The girl she had tormented for being different had not only achieved her dreams but had surpassed everyone else in the room in terms of genuine accomplishment and service to others. Marcus Thompson approached the microphone, apparently trying to salvage the situation with his old charm and bravado. "That's really impressive, Sarah. I'm sure we're all proud of your service." His voice lacked its usual confidence, and several classmates could see through his transparent attempt to associate himself with her success. Sarah looked directly at Marcus as she responded. "Thank you, Marcus. I remember you telling me to fly away during high school. I'm grateful for that advice, because flying away from this place was exactly what I needed to do to become the person I was meant to be." The pointed reference to his past cruelty silenced Marcus completely. Other classmates who remembered the bullying incidents began looking at him and Jessica with obvious disapproval. The social dynamics of the room had shifted completely, with Sarah now commanding the respect and attention that had always been denied to her. Several classmates approached Sarah throughout the rest of the evening, expressing genuine admiration for her service and accomplishments. Many apologized for their past behavior or for failing to intervene when she was being bullied. Sarah accepted their apologies graciously but without warmth, making it clear that forgiveness would not come easily. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had been student body president and was now a successful physician, made a point of seeking out Sarah. "I owe you an apology," she said sincerely. "I was a coward in high school for not standing up to the bullies. What you've accomplished is truly remarkable, and I'm ashamed that our class treated you so poorly." As the evening wound down, Sarah received a text message confirming that her helicopter transport was ready for departure. She had planned this moment carefully, wanting to leave the reunion in a way that would make an unforgettable impression on everyone present. Sarah took the microphone one final time. "I want to thank everyone for a memorable evening. I hope you'll excuse me now, as my ride is waiting." She handed the microphone back to Jessica, who was still struggling to process the complete reversal of her planned scenario. As Sarah walked toward the exit, the sound of helicopter rotors became audible outside the country club. The distinctive rhythmic thumping of a Blackhawk helicopter approaching grew louder, causing conversations throughout the room to stop as people turned toward the windows. The reunion attendees rushed outside to witness something none of them had ever seen before. A massive military helicopter was settling onto the country club's front lawn, its rotor wash creating a dramatic windstorm that scattered leaves and debris across the perfectly manicured grounds. Sarah walked confidently toward the aircraft as several crew members in flight suits waited by the door. She turned back toward the stunned crowd of her former classmates and gave a small wave before climbing aboard. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, its powerful engines drowning out any sound from the ground. As the Black Hawk disappeared into the night sky, the reunion attendees stood in shocked silence on the country club lawn. Jessica Chen and Marcus Thompson looked absolutely devastated as they realized that their attempt to humiliate their former victim had resulted in their own public embarrassment. The story of Sarah's dramatic exit spread quickly through their hometown and social media. The girl who had been mocked for her aviation dreams had literally flown away from her high school reunion in a military helicopter, leaving her former bullies to confront the reality of their own mediocrity. In the months that followed, several classmates reached out to Sarah through social media, expressing genuine respect for her service and accomplishments. Some shared the story of her reunion appearance with friends and family, using it as an example of how perseverance and determination can overcome even the cruelest treatment. Sarah never responded to Jessica's multiple attempts to contact her and apologize. She had moved far beyond the need for validation from people who had shown their true character during her most vulnerable years. The shy, bullied teenager had become a confident military officer who commanded respect through her actions rather than seeking approval from others. The reunion had served its purpose for Sarah. She had demonstrated that dreams can come true when pursued with enough determination, even when others mock and discourage those aspirations. More importantly, she had proven to herself that the frightened girl who had once cowered in the face of bullying was gone forever. Years later, when Sarah reflected on that evening, she felt no satisfaction from the shock and embarrassment she had caused her former tormentors. Instead, she was grateful that their cruelty had motivated her to pursue a path that led to genuine achievement and service to others. The bullies had unknowingly helped forge her into someone stronger than they could ever imagine.